A large semi-truck reverses into a loading dock bay, while a worker stands in the driver's blind spot. Unable to see the ground personnel, the driver continues reversing, pinning the worker against the platform. Because loading docks are high-risk zones, drivers must strictly follow spotter signals, and pedestrians should never position themselves between a reversing vehicle and a fixed object. A sanitation worker sweeps a narrow street while a car attempts to park nearby. The driver loses control of the vehicle, surging backward and striking the worker. Situational awareness is critical for street workers, and while high-visibility clothing helps, physical barriers or cones are often necessary to create a safe buffer zone from unpredictable traffic. A worker opens the rear doors of a transport truck, carrying loose pipes that have shifted against the latch. As the door opens, a heavy pipe tumbles out unexpectedly, striking the worker. To prevent these avalanche scenarios, loads that can roll must be secured independently of the doors, and workers should always open doors cautiously from a safe position. In a textile factory, a worker gets too close to the intake rollers of a large winding machine. The machinery catches their clothing, pulling them into the mechanism. This incident highlights that machine guarding is essential to prevent contact with nip points, and workers must be trained to keep a safe distance from intake zones while ensuring emergency stops are accessible. An operator feeding material into a hydraulic press places a hand inside the danger zone to make an adjustment. The machine cycles unexpectedly, clamping down on the hand. Safety sensors must never be bypassed, and systems like two-hand controls or light curtains are vital to ensure the operator's hands are completely clear before the machine applies pressure. A worker stands near a large rotating industrial drum when a piece of material they are holding gets caught in the spinner. The immense rotational force pulls the worker into the machinery. Workers must respect the kinetic energy of large rotating machines, never hold material being fed into a spinner, and ensure automatic shutoff systems are active. A forklift moves through a warehouse aisle and, due to a blind spot, strikes a pedestrian walking nearby. Segregating pedestrian and forklift traffic is the most effective safety measure in these environments. Where paths must cross, eye contact between the driver and pedestrian must be established before anyone moves to prevent collisions. An overhead crane moving a massive roll of paper suffers a structural failure in the hoist mechanism. The heavy load detaches and falls to the factory floor. This failure reminds us that regular inspections of hoist brakes and cables are mandatory. And more importantly, no one should ever walk or work under a suspended load, regardless of how secure it appears. A worker uses their foot to manually adjust a paper roll on a high-speed winder, but the friction catches their leg, pulling them into the machine. This severe entrapment scenario reinforces the rule that feet or hands should never be used to align materials on moving equipment. Proper tools and automated systems must be used to keep limbs away from intake zones. In a tight warehouse yard, a pedestrian walks behind a reversing truck, assuming the driver is aware of their presence. The truck continues backward, resulting in an impact. While backup alarms are helpful, pedestrians must assume they are invisible to truck drivers and stay completely clear of reversing paths to ensure their safety. An elderly woman stands near the open rear door of a city bus. Before she is safely clear of the vehicle, the bus driver begins to pull away from the curb. The sudden movement causes the woman to lose her balance and fall backward, striking her head hard on the pavement. The bus continues on its route, the driver apparently unaware of what has just happened. This highlights a critical failure of the driver to ensure all passengers are safely clear of the bus before proceeding. Checking mirrors and waiting for passengers to be on the curb is essential to prevent these falls. On a dirt road at a construction or drilling site, Two workers stand beside their small utility truck. Uphill and behind them, a large front-end loader begins to reverse. The operator fails to see the vehicle and workers in their massive blind spot. The loader continues backwards, completely running over and crushing the small truck and the two workers beneath it, who had no chance to escape. This devastating accident shows a complete breakdown of sight awareness. Heavy equipment operators must have a clear 360-degree view or use a spotter before moving, and workers on foot must never linger in the blind spots of large machinery. In a car service bay, a mechanic works under the open hood of a car being converted to run on compressed gas. Without warning, the red gas cylinder inside the engine compartment fails catastrophically. It shoots out of the car like a rocket, ricochets off the ground, and triggers a massive fiery explosion that engulfs a nearby vehicle. Working with compressed gas systems like LPG or CNG is extremely hazardous. This was likely a tank failure from damage or overpressurization, and all work on such systems requires specialized training to prevent an explosive decompression. A busy street market is set up dangerously close to a live railway line. As a long freight train passes through the area, a person standing too near the tracks is struck by the locomotive and pulled under the moving train cars. This dashcam footage captures a busy highway with congested traffic. A motorcyclist attempts to weave between lanes, trying to get ahead. The rider makes a critical error by trying to cut in front of a large tanker truck from the right side, placing them directly in the driver's significant blind spot. The truck, moving forward with traffic, collides with the unseen motorcycle, pulling the rider under its wheels. Riders must always assume they are invisible to truck drivers and avoid maneuvering in these dangerous no zones. On what appears to be a normal day, a high-angle security camera captures a street view in front of a multi-story building. Without any warning, the building's entire facade detaches and collapses in a massive cloud of dust and debris, crashing down onto the street and crushing the parked motorcycles below. This type of catastrophic structural failure points to severe issues like neglected maintenance or a potential gas leak, underscoring the necessity of regular building inspections. Ann operates a large industrial lathe, leaning over the rapidly spinning chuck. His loose jacket sleeve gets snagged, and he is instantly and violently pulled into the machine, spinning at a terrifying speed before a coworker hits the emergency stop. This is a classic entanglement accident. The number one rule when working with rotating machinery is absolutely no loose clothing, untied long hair, or jewelry. These items can be grabbed in a fraction of a second. Additionally, a chuck shield could have prevented this contact. At a gas station next to a busy roundabout, a chaotic car accident occurs. One of the involved cars rolls backward, out of control, directly into the station forecourt, striking an unsuspecting attendant sitting in a chair. This incident underscores the risk of working near live traffic. Protective barriers, like bollards, are essential to shield work areas from errant vehicles. A large truck reverses toward a loading bay, while a pedestrian walks directly into its path from behind. The driver, with no visibility in this massive blind spot, continues backing up and runs the person over completely. This is a tragic and preventable blind spot accident. Large vehicles must be equipped with functioning backup alarms and cameras. Crucially, a dedicated spotter should always guide a reversing truck, maintaining constant visual contact with the driver. In a busy shipping yard, a man walks across the pavement while completely absorbed by his phone. He fails to notice an approaching forklift and steps directly into its path, getting struck and knocked down. This is a clear case of distracted walking in a high-risk environment. Using a phone while walking in an active yard with heavy machinery should be strictly forbidden. Pedestrians must maintain full situational awareness at all times. A mechanic performs welding work underneath a car on a lift. Sparks from his tool ignite a flammable liquid on the floor, likely spilled fuel, and the vehicle erupts into a massive ball of fire. The mechanic is forced to scramble to safety from the inferno. This is a failure of hot work safety procedures. Before any welding or grinding, the area must be completely cleared of all flammable materials, including liquids, vapors, and oily rags. A fire extinguisher must be within arm's reach, and it is also standard practice to disconnect the vehicle's battery. In an underground mine, a group of workers gathers to board an elevator cage. As the first 4 workers step inside, the entire cage structure suddenly breaks free from its lift mechanism and plunges into the dark shaft below. This is a catastrophic structural or mechanical failure of the highest order. Mine elevators, or cages, are subjected to extreme stress and harsh environmental conditions, requiring an exceptionally high standard of maintenance, inspection, and operational oversight. Redundant safety systems are supposed to prevent exactly this type of free fall, pointing to a critical lapse in safety protocols. On a snowy construction site, a crane lowers a long metal beam. A worker on the ground is unable to control the swinging load and is struck violently, getting knocked off his feet. Guiding suspended loads by hand is extremely risky. The correct and safe procedure is to use tag lines, long ropes attached to the load, that allow workers to maneuver it from a safe distance, well outside the potential swing or drop zone. 2 movers attempt to load a tall, heavy appliance into a small van. Moving it on a dolly, the appliance becomes top-heavy and unstable. As they struggle to control it, it tips over, crushing one of the men against the side of the van. Moving tall, top-heavy objects is incredibly dangerous, as their high center of gravity makes them prone to tipping. For a load this size, more personnel or proper lifting equipment like a liftgate should have been used. They underestimated the instability, leading to a fatal crushing injury. A forklift operator turns into the path of a rickshaw. The forks pierce the vehicle. In a busy warehouse, a worker pushing a manual pallet jack enters an aisle. From the opposite direction, a forklift operator turns the corner, their attention focused elsewhere. The operator fails to see the pedestrian directly in their path and collides with them, knocking the person to the floor. This incident underscores the danger of blind corners. Convex mirrors, audible alarms on vehicles, and strictly enforced pedestrian walkways are vital for preventing such collisions. At a building facade, 2 men are working on a multi-level rolling scaffold. One worker is positioned on the top platform, attending to his tasks, while his partner is on the ground below. The worker at the base decides to reposition the scaffold. Instead of ensuring his colleague descends first, he begins to push the entire tall structure along the uneven sidewalk. The scaffold immediately becomes unstable, rocking back and forth precariously. He continues to push until the structure's center of gravity shifts too far, causing it to topple over completely. It crashes down with immense force, throwing the worker from the top platform onto the hard pavement below. This incident is a catastrophic failure of fundamental safety rules. Scaffolding must always be erected on solid, level ground and must never, under any circumstances, be moved while workers are on it. This dangerous shortcut resulted in a severe and easily avoidable accident. Inside a fenced-off automated work cell, a worker stands dangerously close to an active robotic arm. The large robot, programmed to move components, makes a sudden, swift movement toward the man. It mistakes the worker for a part, grabbing him by the head and violently slamming him into a stack of materials. This is precisely why safety cages and light curtains exist. No worker should ever enter the operational envelope of a robot without engaging full lockout-tagout procedures. In a nighttime loading bay, a truck driver stands near the back of his trailer as a forklift approaches with a pallet. The forklift operator, seemingly unaware of the driver's presence, drives forward without slowing down. The operator pins the driver between the powerful machine and the trailer, crushing him instantly. This devastating incident highlights the absolute need for clear communication and situational awareness. Forklift operators must always establish eye contact with pedestrians in their vicinity, and ground personnel should never place themselves in a potential crush zone. A mechanic crouches directly over a large truck tire while inflating it. Without any warning, the tire's structural integrity fails, resulting in a massive explosion. The sheer force of the blast launches the mechanic violently into the air. When inflating high-pressure tires, always use a safety inflation cage and a clip-on chuck with a long hose to maintain a safe distance. At a busy port, workers are loading a flatbed truck near the water's edge. A forklift operator, after placing a load, suddenly accelerates forward at high speed instead of reversing. The machine plunges off the pier, landing directly on a worker standing below and pushing him into the water. This appears to be a tragic case of pedal misapplication. In complex environments, operators must remain hyper-vigilant. Maintaining clear safety zones for pedestrians is essential to provide an escape route in case of operator error. In a factory setting, a worker operates a large rolling press. He reaches over the active machine, likely to clear a jam or adjust the material being fed into it. His arm gets caught in the powerful intake rollers, and in a horrific instant, he is pulled completely into the machine. This demonstrates the absolute necessity of proper machine guarding. All moving parts and pinch points must be covered. For any adjustments or maintenance, a complete lockout-tagout procedure must be performed to de-energize the equipment. In a mining tunnel, a worker pushes a heavy cart toward an elevator shaft. He opens the protective gate and, without verifying that the elevator car is actually there, pushes the cart into the void. He and the cart plummet down the open shaft. Safety interlocks that prevent gates from opening unless the elevator is present are critical. This tragic assumption highlights the rule to always look and confirm before you proceed. Following a traffic accident, a victim lies injured on the road. As bystanders rush to help, a car driving in the opposite lane fails to notice the person on the ground and runs them over. This tragic event highlights the critical need to secure an accident scene immediately. Using hazard lights, warning triangles, or directing traffic is essential to protect the injured and first responders from secondary collisions, which are often just as deadly as the initial crash. In a poorly constructed room, a person is sleeping on a cot. Without warning, the concrete slab roof above them gives way, collapsing and burying the individual under tons of heavy rubble. Rescuers immediately rush in and begin frantically digging through the debris with their bare hands to pull the victim out. This catastrophic structural failure is a direct consequence of subpar construction and lack of proper reinforcement. It underscores the vital importance of adhering to building codes and using qualified engineers and builders, as any shortcuts in overhead construction can have fatal consequences for those below. In a repair yard, a mechanic is working on a truck with its cab tilted forward to access the engine. Another man works on a pickup truck parked directly in front of it. Suddenly, the hydraulic prop holding the massive cab fails, and it slams shut, crushing the man working on the pickup. This is a critical failure of basic maintenance safety. Never trust hydraulics alone. A secondary mechanical safety lock or a properly rated support brace must always be used when working under any raised heavy component. During a demolition, workers use a small front-end loader and a makeshift hoist to lower a large metal smokestack. One worker stands directly in the fall path, guiding the base. The temporary rigging fails, and the massive pipe crashes down, striking the worker and pinning him. His colleagues rush to try and lift the immense weight. This incident is a textbook example of disregarding rigging safety. Never stand under a suspended load. All lifting operations must be planned by a competent person, using properly rated equipment and maintaining a clear and respected drop zone at all times. Men are attempting to move a large, top-heavy commercial refrigerator or vending machine. They are using an improper method, trying to slide and pivot it by hand without proper equipment like a dolly or pallet jack. As they maneuver the appliance, its high center of gravity causes it to become unstable. It begins to tip over, and one of the men is unable to get out of the way. The incredibly heavy machine falls directly on top of him, crushing him against the floor. Moving heavy and tall objects requires careful planning and the use of appropriate mechanical aids to prevent them from tipping over. During nighttime road construction, a worker in a high-visibility vest walks near a large wheeled excavator. The operator begins to swing the machine's cab to reposition it. The worker is standing in the excavator's massive blind spot. As the cab rotates, the heavy counterweight swings around and pins the unsuspecting man against a stack of concrete barriers, crushing him. Swing radius accidents are a common and deadly hazard. Ground personnel must never enter the swing radius of an excavator without first getting confirmation from the operator that they have been seen. Inside a workshop, two men are performing maintenance on a large industrial machine. They are positioned directly underneath a heavy, suspended component of the apparatus. It appears the component was either improperly supported or the lifting mechanism failed. Suddenly, the entire assembly gives way and collapses downwards, crushing both workers beneath its immense weight. This is a fatal violation of a primary safety rule. Never work under a suspended load. Heavy components must be physically secured with certified blocks or safety stands before any personnel are allowed to work underneath them. In a chaotic street intersection, a pedestrian begins to cross the road. At the same time, a wheeled excavator makes a turn, its operator's view obstructed. The operator does not see the pedestrian, and the front of the heavy machine strikes her, knocking her to the ground. Continuing its turn, the operator, still unaware of the collision, drives directly over her. Heavy equipment operating in public spaces poses an immense risk. In a busy industrial yard, a forklift operator attempts the difficult task of lifting a large, heavy, and awkwardly shaped pipe flange with only one fork. The load is dangerously unstable and severely off-center from the start. As the operator raises the mast, the forklift's center of gravity shifts dramatically. In a matter of seconds, the machine loses its balance and tips over sideways, trapping and crushing the operator in the cab underneath its immense weight. This tragic incident was caused by the improper lifting of an unbalanced and oversized load, far exceeding the forklift's rated capacity and stability. Such an object should have been moved using appropriate rigging with multiple attachment points and a crane, not a forklift, to prevent a catastrophic tip-over. During a circus performance in front of a live audience, an acrobat begins to ride a bicycle across a high wire. Midway through the act, the performer suddenly loses balance. Both he and the bicycle plummet to the hard stage below. High wire acts are incredibly dangerous, and this incident underscores the risk. The clear lack of a safety net or a personal fall arrest harness connected to a safety line made this fall unsurvivable. A young girl is seen in a garage, playing near a partially open metal roll-up door. She curiously reaches up and begins to pull the heavy door downward. Suddenly, the door's counterbalancing spring mechanism, appears to fail catastrophically. The heavy door breaks free and free falls with tremendous speed and force, slamming shut and trapping the child underneath in an instant. This is a heartbreaking and preventable tragedy. Heavy, spring-loaded doors require regular inspection and maintenance to ensure their safety mechanisms are fully functional. Two pedestrians are standing on the very edge of a busy roadway, perilously close to passing traffic. A white bus approaches, and without slowing, it strikes both individuals, throwing them violently into the air. Standing this close to an active traffic lane leaves absolutely no margin for error or driver distraction. On a highway, a man is riding his motorcycle when a panicked bull suddenly runs into his path. The collision knocks the rider from his bike, throwing him directly into the lane of an oncoming truck, leaving no time for the truck driver to stop. An elderly woman attempts to cross a road while pulling a large wheeled trash can behind her. As she steps into the street, she moves directly into the path of an oncoming white SUV. The driver doesn't appear to see her, and the vehicle strikes her without slowing down. Inside a tire repair shop, two mechanics work on a large, unmounted tractor tire. As they attempt to inflate it without proper safety equipment, the tire's internal pressure builds to a critical point. It explodes with catastrophic force, creating a powerful concussive blast that throws the men. Inflating large tires is extremely dangerous due to the immense stored energy and must always be done inside a reinforced steel safety cage. At a railroad crossing, a scooter with two riders waits as the warning gates are down. Growing impatient, the driver decides to maneuver around the safety barrier and cross the tracks. As they enter the crossing, a train appears at high speed, giving them no chance to escape the collision. Railroad crossing gates and warning signals are absolute safety measures and must always be obeyed. Going around them is a fatal gamble. Inside a material processing facility, a worker manages heavy stone slabs positioned near a cutting machine. Suddenly, a large slab becomes unstable and tips forward due to a shift in weight, creating a hazardous situation for the operator in the fall zone. This incident highlights the critical need to secure heavy loads during processing and reminds us to never stand in the direct line of fire where unstable materials might fall. In a chemical processing plant, workers are inspecting a large industrial tank when an apparent valve failure causes a sudden, rapid release of pressure. The resulting release of energy disrupts the immediate area, serving as a stark reminder that pressure vessels require rigorous maintenance. Workers must always verify pressure levels and follow strict lockout procedures before approaching such equipment. An auto mechanic is working near an open service pit while a vehicle is being positioned nearby. The driver appears to lose control, possibly confusing the pedals, causing the car to accelerate suddenly into the pit area. To prevent such accidents, clear communication between drivers and ground guides is vital, and physical barriers should be used around open pits during vehicle maneuvering. A group of workers moves a tall metal scaffold structure across a paved area without noticing the overhead environment. As they push the frame, the top makes contact with high-voltage power lines, sending an electrical current down to the workers. This scenario emphasizes the importance of surveying the area for overhead hazards and maintaining a safe distance from power lines at all times. A vehicle is being loaded onto a flatbed tow truck when the securing mechanism fails, causing the car to roll rapidly backward off the ramp toward the operator. This mechanical failure illustrates why operators should never stand directly behind or below a load being winched. Regular equipment checks on cables and winches are essential to prevent failure during recovery operations. At a construction site, a crane lifts a bundle of heavy metal beams when the rigging suddenly slips. The load detaches mid-air and falls to the ground near the workers. This incident underscores that proper rigging techniques and load balancing are essential for crane safety. And establishing a clear exclusion zone underneath lifted loads is mandatory to protect personnel. In a busy commercial kitchen, staff transport a large, open container of hot liquid when one worker loses their footing. The container tips over, spilling the high-temperature contents onto the floor and the personnel. To minimize thermal risks, slip-resistant footwear is crucial, and carts with sealed lids should always be used when transporting hot substances. At a metal recycling yard, a worker introduces an ignition source near a sealed metal drum. Residual fumes inside the container ignite instantly, causing a rapid expansion of gas and a concussive blast. This serves as a critical warning never to apply heat or open flames to sealed drums without verifying they are completely empty and purged of hazardous residues. A driver prepares to unload a truck filled with heavy timber logs, but as the side restraints are released, the load shifts due to gravity. One of the heavy timbers falls outward, striking the individual standing next to the truck. When releasing cargo straps, workers must always assume the load has shifted and stand clear or use remote release mechanisms to avoid the fall path. A machinist working with a long metal bar on a rotating lathe gets their loose clothing caught on the spinning material. Although they pull away just in time, this near miss demonstrates that loose clothing, gloves, and jewelry are major hazards near rotating machinery. Wearing proper fitted work attire is a primary defense against entanglement. A person walks down a narrow alleyway between warehouse buildings. Behind them, a forklift carrying a load that obstructs the operator's forward view is traveling in the same direction. The operator, unable to see the pedestrian, continues forward and runs the person over. This is a primary rule of forklift safety. If your forward view is blocked by a load, you must travel in reverse. Using a horn at intersections and having designated pedestrian paths are also crucial measures to prevent this type of accident. At a lumber yard, a forklift operator attempts to lift a tall, heavy, and unstable stack of wooden panels. As the forks rise, the machine's center of gravity shifts forward, causing it to become dangerously unbalanced. The entire forklift tips forward, sending the massive load crashing down onto a nearby worker who is instantly pinned beneath the immense weight. This fatal error was caused by exceeding the forklift's rated load capacity. Operators must be trained to read and understand their vehicle's load chart and never attempt to lift a load that is too heavy or unstable. In a scrap metal recycling plant, a worker climbs into a massive baling press to clear a jam, placing himself in an extremely dangerous position. While he is inside, an excavator operator working nearby drops a load of scrap, startling the man. As he tries to get out, the press unexpectedly begins its compression cycle. The powerful hydraulic ram activates, trapping and crushing the man inside the machine before he can escape. This is a horrifying failure of lockout, tag-out procedures. Before any worker enters a machine for maintenance, all energy sources must be completely shut off and locked to prevent accidental activation. This procedure would have saved his life. In a cramped warehouse aisle, two employees stand talking, oblivious to the high-reach forklift operating behind them. The operator lifts a pallet high into the racking, but the load is unbalanced. The entire pallet of goods slides off the forks and falls onto the workers below. Pedestrians must always be aware of their surroundings and never stand under a suspended load. Inside an automated factory, a worker leans over a conveyor, putting himself in the path of a robotic arm. The machine activates unexpectedly, striking the man. As colleagues rush to help, a second robot further down the line malfunctions, swinging its arm and hitting another worker. This chain reaction points to a systemic failure of the safety systems. Proper light curtains, pressure mats, or sensors should automatically shut down all robots in a zone the moment a human enters. At a gas station, an attendant is crouched down, cleaning a spill. The driver of a white SUV, who had just been refueling, gets into their vehicle and pulls away, without checking their blind spots. The car turns directly into the low-profile attendant, knocking him over and dragging him several feet before stopping. This shows the critical importance of situational awareness for both drivers and workers. Drivers must be vigilant in pedestrian-heavy areas, while ground workers should use cones to create a visible safety barrier around their immediate workspace. At a recycling facility, a man is using a long pole to push material into a large industrial shredder. He is leaning far over the machine's opening in a precarious position. Another worker approaches from behind and throws more material into the shredder's hopper. This sudden influx causes the machine to violently grab the first worker's pole, pulling him in after it. This horrific accident was caused by a complete lack of machine guarding and poor communication between workers. At a factory, a man walks through an open area below a mezzanine. Without warning, a massive, heavy roll of fabric falls from the level above, landing directly on top of him. This incident highlights the absolute importance of securing all materials stored at height, using tow boards, netting, or other barriers to prevent objects from falling. In a warehouse, a forklift operator places a crate on a truck. He then gets off the forklift, leaving it running with the forks raised and, most importantly, without setting the parking brake. As he walks in front of the machine to adjust the load, the forklift begins to roll forward on the slight incline. He is trapped and crushed between the multi-ton vehicle and the truck. This fatal accident was caused by ignoring the most fundamental rule of forklift safety. Before dismounting, always lower the forks, set the parking brake, and put the machine in neutral.